All right, let's talk some Florida State football. Of course, the boys are in camp. They're in Tallahassee. We got Jason Parker on the line from chopchat. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on, Mark.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for stopping by. And Florida State, obviously, I have vowed to other Florida State guests and contributors that we have on that I will refrain from mentioning 5 and 7 too many more times because we're moving ahead to 2019. But
what is 5 and 7? What happened? What happened? Nothing happened last year. There was no football last year.
That was at Wake Forest, right? It had to be somewhere like that. Couldn't be in Florida State, not with that talent. But even the first-year transition, even giving that leeway to a first-year transition for a new head coach, as we see across the country with 12 or 15 programs every year, I was just amazed, flabbergasted. There's a number of adjectives you could use at how ill-prepared this football team looked most of the time. I'm looking at 2 games that I would consider that they played up to their talent level or close to it when they beat Wake Forest by 3 touchdowns, and they squeaked by a decent Boston College team by 1 point. But otherwise, they just did not look prepared.
I think, too, and I have been I don't want to say an apologist, but I've defended Willie Taggart a lot last year, and I will still continue for the reason that what you saw last year was a buildup of years that came from, and I'll flat out say it, Jimbo Fisher, you could tell, stopped caring after 2014. And I'm not saying he didn't want to win, but you could tell that between some of the moves he made, not getting rid of certain assistants that probably should not have been around anymore, and the whole losing to teams you shouldn't lose to was even before Willie got on campus. You look in 2015 to Georgia Tech, 2016 to North Carolina, even 2017, there were a couple losses that shouldn't – the Miami game, either year, in 2017 and 2018. So I think a lot of it was, and I think you're starting to see people, when they do a deep dive into it, go, yes, last year was a bad year. Last year, yes, a lot of the blame does need to go to Willie Taggart because he was the coach. That being said, he was left with a huge mess coming into last year. And I think you're finally starting to see people realize, oh, it was as bad as some people said it was.
Mark Rogers, TV, the voice of college football, talking Florida State. We got Jason Parker on the line from Chop Chat. So in regards to Willie Taggart's off-the-field performance, in regards to the recruiting efforts, your thoughts now that we've seen him do his thing through 2 cycles of recruiting classes?
I think I like the 2 things I would say that I like about, especially just using 2019 as an example, was he recruited the 2 main positions of need, offensive line and secondary. You look at the guys, he brought in 6 offensive linemen. You've got several who are already enrolled, already taking part in spring drills, same with the secondary. And you have, yes, we lost a couple of the big name recruits. Obviously, Nick Cross was the big name when he went to Maryland after being a longtime Florida State commit. But he got positions of need, number 1. Number 2, I like the fact that he went back to recruiting Florida, and in particular South Florida. And I'm a little biased living in South Florida, but he went back to recruiting the hotbeds that Florida State Florida State football was getting before. And there was a certain time towards the end of the Bobby Bowden era and then towards the Jimbo era when there was more recruiting, more national. And I get it. If you can get a 5-star like Cam Akers from Mississippi, I understand that. But to me, and to I think a lot of fans, the best talent is in the state of Florida. And when you're not recruiting your home base, you see what happened. You see a lot of those guys who, yeah, you can be a 5-star in the state of Idaho, but give me a 3-star from Orlando or Tampa or Miami in a heartbeat. And I think Willie has started to do that. That being said, I think there were a few areas that I would have liked to have seen him do better at. No running backs, wide receivers, 1 wide receiver in the group. You know, you don't have to bring in 5 every single class, but I think you need to bring in somebody from each position. And as far as the quarterbacks go, everyone's going to point to that and say, oh, he didn't bring in, you know, you lose some of the guys that have been committed or were big targets towards Florida State. That one hurt. Those hurt a little bit. I do think if the NCAA does approve Jordan Travis, that would be a huge get up because of the fact that he would still have 3 years left.
Jason, you mentioned Cam Akers and all the hype that accompanied him in his route to Tallahassee, and he's certainly not been anything close to a bust. not going in that direction. But at the same time, he looked like a pretty much marginal back for a top 40 program in the nation. Was that more attributed to the offensive line, or maybe he's not quite the dynamic player that was expected?
I think that, and I will be the first person to criticize the offensive line. That offensive line has been atrocious for the last 3 seasons. It dates back to the 2016, and Rick Trickett as the coach, you could argue, should have probably not stayed on for the 2017 season as the assistant. And that's what goes back to a thing about Jimbo being too loyal to some of his assistants and some of his guys. So I will say that I believe a decent amount of it was the offensive line. That being said, when you were a 1,000-yard rusher in 2017 as a freshman, for you to essentially downgrade so bad, some of that has to be on him. And if you're going to be the 5-star, if you're going to be arguably the top running back from the 2017 class, you have to overcome those mistakes. I'm not expecting 1,000 yards last season, but to downfall to the 300-yard, 400-yard category that he was, you have to put some of that on him. There's some plays where you just have to make the plays yourself to overcome that offensive line. That being said, I think as the offensive line increases, and I think he realizes that the onus is going to be on him, that yes, you are one more bad year away from being in that bust category, from falling to that level. Hopefully a fire got lit under him. Only time will tell on that one. But yeah, I think some of it has to be placed on him.
Time to talk some Florida State football. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game that you and I love. Hardcore college football analysis for the smart fan, discussion, debate, analysis across the board each and every day. We got Jason Parker on the line from Chop Chat. That's on the fan-sided network, so please join him right there. There was a scrimmage last weekend, so it's difficult to get information, Jason, from most of these scrimmages. So what can we gather from what was said after the skirmish?
Well, Taggart was very complimentary of the defense. He was very, and he talked them up very well. And I think that's an unsung area, because a lot of people are going to focus on the offense for Florida State, because the offense last year was at times atrocious and at good times okay. But I think defense is going to be the key, because not just you want to see improved play from a secondary that was among one of the worst in college football last year, which is disappointing because of the amount of 5-star and 4-star talent that's in that group. But you're also going to be replacing, to me, arguably the biggest question is who will be replacing Brian Burns on the defensive end as playing that edge rush position. You see what's going on right now. He's vaulting up the draft boards. How are you going to replace somebody like that? But Taggart was very complimentary of these guys, the young guys coming in. So I think that's going to be the issue that you're going to see. The offense will be better next year. Can the defense, both the rush defense, continue to play like it did for about the first 2/3, 3/4 of the season? Obviously, towards the end of last year when you're playing, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Florida, your numbers are going to go down. But arguably for most of the season, the run defense was top 15 in college football. Can the secondary, if the secondary can even play in the top half of college football, and the run defense can continue to be that dominant, I think you could see the Seminoles surprise some teams next year.
So, Jason, back to the offense, and of course you bring in Kendall Briles, who has had success just about everywhere he's gone, and the difference in the offenses that he has led versus what he inherited or left behind has been pretty stark. So he worked for his dad at Baylor. They had some of the more prolific offenses in the history of college football. I'm not going to say the best offenses in college football, because I think Big 12 defense certainly gave it some support, but certainly from a numbers standpoint, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of in the minority knocking Big 12 defense at times. I don't know. It's just something that I see, and I don't think anyone else does. But yeah, they tended to have some inflated numbers there at Baylor, but they were certainly gifted with the likes of Corey Coleman and Josh Gordon and so forth. Houston, he takes over a 65th ranked offense. They turn into the number 4 offense in the country. FAU, similarly, they were 8th ranked when he was there. He leaves, they drop to 50th. So there's got to be a ton of hope, considering what Florida State offers in regards to talent, mixed with Kendall Briles' approach to offense. One
of the areas where I was very critical of Coach Taggart last year was I think that they tried to go too quickly to what he calls the Gulf Coast offense, the RPO, because most of the guys who were brought in before were brought in for a pro style offense under Jimbo Fisher. As you saw last year, it's extremely hard to take guys from one offense to a virtually completely different style of offense. So that's what I believe this year will be a little bit better, because you will see a lot of similarities between what Briles has run previously and what Taggart tried to do before. That's number one. Number two, I think the fact that Briles will be given the keys to the offense right away, instead of it just doing last year where Willie ran everything and then Walt Bell started to do it more towards the end of the year. So I think once knowing that Kendall Briles is the man, he'll be the one doing most of the stuff, will make things a lot easier, and there's not going to be that back and forth. With all that being said, I am a little bit hesitant. The borderline pessimist in me is just a little bit hesitant because of what he has done before. Like we talk about, I will be the first person to knock Big 12 defenses every day of the week. Also, FAU, Houston, great teams, great offenses, but they never really played decent defenses. They rarely played defenses who were in the top half of college football as far as total defense when it was at both stops, both in Boca and in Houston. So that is my one caveat. With that being said, as much as you hate to sound like a broken record, there's nowhere to go but up. There really is nowhere to go but up with this offense and whatnot. I mean, you look at it, the Miami game last year, the offense still played well in a loss. As much as you hate to say it, in the Clemson game, the first quarter, the defense held up and the offense was It wasn't like they were getting blown out of a lot of games last year offensively. What would happen is they would just fall behind, and it was the oh shucks, here we go again. So it's just about staying competitive. And I think if he can put points on the board, keep these guys these confidence that they can stay in these games, then I think you can see a much better season this coming year.
Jason, the counter caveat to what you just delivered there in regards to Briles' performance at those two schools would be, yes, it was not performed against rugged schedules in the Power Five, but at the same time, the before and after, or the before and after from the flip side, was performed against light competition. So it's not like FAU had a soft schedule when he was running the offense, and suddenly they're playing Alabama and Ohio State every week the next year. So we'll see if it translates. Which brings us to the quarterback spot, of course. To me, James Blackman was harshly criticized by a lot of people out there without the offensive line support, being thrown into it in 2017 after DeAndre Francois was supposed to be the starter for the entire season. And if he proved nothing else, he proved, like Francois, to be a pretty tough customer back there as a beanpole getting thrown around all the time, that he hung in there.
I work in South Florida, and so I work around a lot of Hurricane fans and Gator fans and whatnot down in this area. And yeah, with both of them, with both Francois and Blackman, that's the first thing they would say is those are some tough you-know-whats, because they were getting knocked around. I think Blackman, and I wrote about this for tomorrow on chopchat.com, that this is especially with the spring game this weekend, Blackman needs to show his skill set. He needs to show his talent, because in 2017 he was given a mulligan on a decent amount of those mistakes that he made because he was the freshman. He was 1 year out of high school, and he was thrown into a situation that you never would have expected for him to play in. Last year, he was the most popular man on campus, and as somebody who's covered college football for years, the backup quarterback is always the most popular guy. Sean McGuire was popular even when Jameis Winston was winning the Heisman Trophy and winning a national title. The backup quarterback is always going to be popular. So there was a lot of people, the second DeAndre Francois started having trouble last year, which some of it was on DeAndre, some of it, again, was on the offensive line. It was immediately put James in. And you saw what he did against a porous NC State pass defense, but still, let's give him credit. He threw for 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, had a very good game passing the ball. Now's the chance where he has to shine week in and week out. The same mistakes in 2017 are not going to cut it. He has to come out, I think this weekend in the spring game, has to come out and give both the coaches, give the fans, give everyone glimmers of the big play offense, what they want to see, so he can solidify himself as the starter, because you've got Alex Hornibrook who's going to be coming in. which a lot of people are starting to say he'll definitely give James some competition. I still think Blackman is the odds-on favorite, but stranger things have happened. If Jordan Travis gets approved by the NCAA, he might be able to give some competition. So he'll have competition on the field, but I think he needs to solidify the starting spot now, and I think he needs to come out against Boise State the first week of the year if he is the starter, guns blazing. He needs to have a big game, not just for the momentum factor, but to prove that things have changed and that he is the man to lead this team.
Now, Jason, I've had Florida State folks say to me that Hornibrook was a curious addition because he just doesn't fit the offense. I think there was just a need for depth at the position. And when you can have what most likely is going to be the backup quarterback, be that experienced, and I know that there are detractors of Hornibrook out there that say, Wisconsin run game, he was supported by, the big grounded effort. And that's true to the most part. But I watch a ton of Wisconsin football, and he's a capable quarterback. At his best, he carved up a really good Miami defense in the Orange Bowl. And that is pretty much what the best he's going to give you. But still put up 34 points and a ton of yardage and touchdown passes against Miami. Now, at his worst, he gives it away a couple times too many. But he's capable, and with the right protection, obviously he's not a dynamic playmaker guy back there with his feet, so he does need protection, and but he can deliver.
You hit the nail on the head. I think you said it exactly right. He is an insurance policy. He is, the Allstate, the State Farm, the Geico, whatever you want to say. He is the insurance policy.
I'll have to check my sponsors, Jason, before I let you go on with that.
I'll check with mine too. I think we might have the same. Who knows? But yeah, he is the insurance policy for Taggart, for Briles, for the offense this year. He is the guy because, like you said before, and we talked about this, Blackman is one hit away. They keep saying, oh, he's gained 20 pounds. I don't see it. I interviewed Willie Taggart before last season, and he said the same thing. Oh, yeah, he's up to 180 pounds. Where? I'd love to see where is he wearing a 25-pound vest? I don't know.
Those thick ankles, I guess.
He is the size of my leg. He's a big man, but he's durable. That being said, how durable can you be? So Hornibrook is that. Hornibrook is the guy to come in, and I don't think Briles would do a 2-quarterback system unless the going got really tough. So I think Hornibrook is there as a just in case. He is the guy who, if God forbid Blackman gets knocked out of the game against Clemson, Hornibrook isn't going to be deer in the headlights because he's faced Ohio State, he's faced Michigan, he's faced Penn State, he's faced good high quality teams before. So I think it's a case of that. I think there's also a case where Hornibrook was the last quarterback standing amongst the transfer portal and the new free agency of college football that some are calling it. So I think it was one of those things where Taggart said, we need to get somebody in here, A, just in case Jordan Travis doesn't get cleared by the NCAA, and B, because we need somebody.
Time for some Chop Chat with Jason Parker from Chop Chat, appropriately Florida State football coverage there on Fansided. So please join him right there. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. You know the deal here. Hopefully we discuss, debate, and analyze college football each and every day, and hopefully you join us. Please share the videos, like the videos, comment, and subscribe. We're talking Florida State football. What position battle outside of the quarterback realm intrigues you?
There's a lot of fun battles, actually. And I'm going to tell you one that people aren't really talking about. I think you could easily see, for the first time in years, an Aguayo not kicking for the Seminoles this year. Towards the end of last year, Ricky struggled. I think he had the problem of, A, you're following your brother, who was arguably the best college kicker maybe the last decade. He comes out the first game against Ole Miss in 2016, has a school record for field goals, and since then you've seen him start to struggle a little bit. So they signed a kicker this year from up in Georgia who could easily make things interesting in that battle. And I say that with kind of a smirk on my face because, you still don't know about the offensive situation. So you want to get points wherever possible. So, 3 points is better than nothing. So I think that's going to be an interesting position battle right there. And I think at the linebacker spot, I think linebacker was the one spot last year where you almost had, players by committee playing the spot. You had the defensive line was solid up front. The secondary was horrible, and the linebackers were basically just what 2 or 3 guys can get on the field at the time. So I want to see what Emmett Rice does. I want to see Josh Brown. I want to see these guys at linebacker and see if they can play the linebacker position that FSU is known for. I'm not asking them to be Derek Brooks all over again, but I need them to back up the line, and I need them to sometimes bail out the secondary. That could be the difference between a 6-6 season and a 9-3 season.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. If you enjoy what we do here, hit the like button, even if you don't agree with me or in this particular video. Jason, if you like what we do and deliver, hit the like button. Help us build the channel. Now, before we started to record, Jason gave me credit for planting the Florida State helmet front and center on the top shelf here, but unfortunately next to Florida, so we had to make a bit of a switch there. I moved LSU in its place, and Jason, you had mentioned that there is talks about getting those 2 teams together.
Yeah, a couple months ago, there have been rumors that have gone around about them possibly scheduling a neutral site 1 year in New Orleans, 1 year in Orlando. And that would be interesting. I think a lot of fans would like to see that. They haven't played in almost 3 decades. 1991 was the last time they played in Baton Rouge. So that'd be interesting. I feel like games like that would be great for college football. I've written a couple articles in the past about some of the different Power 5 matchups that should be played. I'm personally one of those guys who would like to see them play more at home. I understand the need of neutral site. We got Florida and Miami opening the year in Orlando, games in Atlanta, Dallas. I get it. It's about money. I understand. Florida State's playing in Jacksonville against Boise State for that very reason. That being said, I'm old school in that regard. I'd rather FSU go under the lights in Death Valley, and I'd rather the purple and gold come to Tallahassee for a game. I think that's what college football is.
Jason, you bring to mention the Boise State opener, kind of a curious game. It's obviously a very dangerous game against a team that was very good last year, a top 25 team that lost the conference championship game in overtime, but typically we're understanding that Boise State probably wins 8 out of 10 years in the Mountain West, but a very good team that you don't necessarily, as Florida State, get full credit for. If you win, you're still supposed to win it.
There's a lot of, and we've written stuff in the past, there's a lot of people who are putting FSU on upset alert, and I think rightfully so. And I will say this to my fellow, Florida State grads, my fellow Florida State fans, we need to not take this game lightly. This is a game Boise State can easily come to Jacksonville and send Florida State home with their 3rd straight opening game loss. And that's just the cold reality of it. Maybe 10 years ago, even when Boise State was first coming up, you would still say, oh, Florida State has the athletes, Florida State can do it. And don't get me wrong, I think Florida State still, athlete to athlete, is still a better roster, a better team. That being said, as we've talked about earlier, Florida State sometimes plays down, number 1, and I do think Boise State is that team that doesn't get enough credit anymore. You're talking about UCF, you're talking about other teams. Boise State could easily be the group of 5 representative next year in the New Year's 6 bowl games. And arguably, if you look at their schedule, they go beat Florida State, they beat a good BYU team, they have a couple wins under their belt. They're sniffing the playoff if they go 12-0 next year. So that's a real possibility. So Florida State, and I think after last year, you almost hate to say it, but as weird as this may sound, a losing season might have almost been the best thing that could have happened to Florida State. In a lot of ways, a lot of things the year before, when you went 6-6 thanks to a rescheduled game against Louisiana Monroe, a stretch at the end of the year where you beat a 4-7 Florida team, a 4-8 Syracuse team, and Delaware State in 2017. That's how you kept this bowl streak and winning season streak going. To an extent, at times, it was almost like, okay, we're playing to go 6-6, and I get it. It was a great streak and whatnot, but you can't live by that streak. That's not what FSU football is about. FSU football is 10-win seasons, conference titles, playing for national championships, or playing in bigger bowl games. That's what FSU football is about. I almost compare it to the Miami Dolphins being down here. As Dolphins fans, when the team's going 3-13, you're still talking about, oh, well, we went undefeated in 1972. When all you have is something from decades and decades and decades ago, you can't move forward. So I almost feel like it might end up being a blessing in disguise to wake these guys up and say, hey, you want to get back to this level, you've got to work.
And to your point, Jason, against a group of 5 team, Florida State fans only need to look back to the 2015/16 Peach Bowl effort or lack thereof against Houston. And that was a team that coming off a college football playoff appearance a year before, and that was going to win the Orange Bowl the next year. That was a clear top 10 team in the country, and they just didn't deliver on that day. And Houston really took it to them. Oh,
and then that goes back to what I talked about. You could almost tell after there was that streak from 2012 to 2014, where Florida State, arguably one of the best 3-year streaks of just they lost 3 games total, and 2 of them were in 1 year. One was by 1 point to NC State. You lose to Florida at home in 2012, and then Oregon in the first ever college football playoff game. But then you got in 2015, you start to see them start to play down. Yes, they're beating teams like USF. They're beating teams in the ACC, but not like they were doing before. You had that loss to a bad Georgia Tech team on a fluke missed field goal that gets returned in a game that they should not have even been close to losing to a Georgia Tech team that year. No offense to our people in Atlanta listening, but Florida State had no business losing to that team that year. And then, yeah, you go in and it's almost like, oh, we're disappointed to play in the Peach Bowl. And Houston took care of it. So, yes, on any given day, this is a Florida State team, and that's what's frustrating to a lot of the Florida State fans, a lot of my fellow fans and alumni, are you're losing to teams you have no business losing to. I'm sorry, you look at Virginia Tech last year. Virginia Tech showed their true colors as the year went on, and they needed a rescheduled game to get bowl eligible as well. And you have no business losing. I'm not saying we shouldn't have lost them, but you have no business losing to them 24-3 in the opener. You lose to a Miami team that you look later on, you really had no business losing to in a game like that. Syracuse is a good team. I'm not sure if that game's played all those times, 10 times, if Syracuse wins a majority of those times. So you don't know, and that's what's frustrating, is it's not that same, you go in with that same confidence of, we've got this game. Every game, it's like Boise State, Louisville, That's the frustrating part.
Yeah, all credit to Dino Babers, but I'm going to have to see that play out one more time with a roster filled with recruiting classes in the 50s. So I'm just going to have to see that play out again. But again, they took care of the schedule, but it was a week 1 and they didn't beat anyone really that good. Probably NC State, the best team that they beat in finishing second in the ACC.
Let's be honest, we're all chasing Clemson right now. And I know we want to think that we're still on the same, some FSU fans want to think we're on the same level. No, it's Clemson and everyone else right now. So we know our place.
Yeah, they are the biggest favorite of any conference in college football, and it's not even close. That would be the one shocker. There would be no shocker if Alabama got knocked off, Ohio State, Oklahoma, etc., because there are 2 or 3 other teams that we could conceivably say, okay, they've got the talent, the ability, and the coaching staff to get it done. But versus Clemson right now, to me, the ACC is down, but it's probably a temporary stay because the onus is on Florida State, number 1, then probably Miami, number 2, to balance out the power structure at the top.
Well, the problem is also, I think that you right now have, and this is something that's beyond my pay grade and your pay grade, but the ACC should seriously think about realigning their divisions. They won't, because the way you do it, whether you do it geographically, north and south, east, west, however, it's the North Carolina schools would end up not – it'd be weird math, and they don't want to do that because we all know the North Carolina schools are the bread and butter as far as the old school guard of the ACC. But right now you should not have arguably the 4 best teams in the conference being Clemson, Syracuse, NC State, and Florida State. If you look at all the rankings, are traditionally like the top 4. Miami sometimes gets thrown in there. Should not be in the same division. So you should look at that. Like, do you move a Virginia over in exchange for an NC State? Do you move some stuff just so you have more of an equal base right now? Because right now there is no equal base. You look, I get that it was Pittsburgh last year, but Pittsburgh goes and plays Clemson in the ACC championship game and gets beat down. The year before, Miami gets beat down by Clemson. And it's the Atlantic Division, I believe, has won all the championships since 2011. So the last 8 championships have all been won by the Atlantic Division. So if the ACC wanted to get some more respectability, they need to have it where it's not just the championship game being the coronation for either Florida State or Clemson to go to the BCS or the playoffs.
Or to rephrase it, Jason, Clemson and Florida State have won the ACC championship.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I mean, but you look at it. I mean, I think Georgia Tech played us tight a couple years.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's been a blowout. I mean, the year Duke was finally a ranked team was good. We beat them by 38 points in the championship game.
Yep.
And no one's going to respect your conference if it's just one team against, no one else.
No question. Jason Parker helping us out on Florida State football. You can join him on Chop Chat. It's on the Fansided Network. Jason, it was great to break down on Florida State football. You're welcome anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark, for having me.